And we're live. Welcome back, everyone. Owen here. Hope you can hear me okay. Maybe drop something in the chat if the audio is coming through good, or if it's not, let me know. Little different topic today. It's been something that's been on my mind for a while, and but it's one of those things where I really have felt the need to talk about it, but I loathe the idea of talking about it because I have found it nearly impossible to engage in any kind of respectful, reasonable, useful discussion about COVID, the lockdowns, the vaccine, all that kind of stuff, even 5 years later. And yet it still permeates um, many parts of society, families, including my own. People have, I would say, even stronger feelings about it than they ever did, and it still impacts me to this day. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit tonight. So bear with me. This is going to be far afield from what I normally talk about, but it's something that I think needs to be said, and perhaps from a little different perspective than seems to be prevalent. Um, I would say there are two very different perspectives on this out there. I don't fit nicely into either one of them. Some days that's a blessing, and some days it's a curse because I feel like I have no allies in this. I just have myself, my thoughts, my own conscience. So anyway, um, so why am I talking about this today? So Thursday, so today is Monday, so like 4 days ago, 3 4 days ago, I had a cardiac procedure. It's been on the list of things to do for a while. Nothing serious, except for the fact that anything involving the heart is, I think, by definition, kind of a serious matter. I'm not a young guy. I'm not an old guy. I'm not 50, but I'm not 40. So, um, much too young to be dealing with these kinds of things. But here I am. And the reason why the reason why I'm talking about COVID and the stuff related to COVID because of this is because it continues to affect this area of my life and my family. Um, and I'm not sure where to start, but let me just say this. I had a I had a cardiac procedure. It's a diagnostic study. It's called a EP study. Last summer, when I had Lyme's disease real bad, the I had a very high heart rate. So I got Lyme's disease from what I could tell camping with my family in the Northwoods, and became very sick. I actually did think I had COVID. I got very serious night sweats, fevers. I'd pretty much wake up every night, every morning, drenched in sweat, have to change the bedding, and eventually went in, took a COVID test. It was negative, somewhat surprising, I guess. So the doctor started checking around and then started to suspect Lyme's or some other um, tick-borne virus, West Nile, things like that. And during the course of my Lyme's, I developed a very rapid heart rate, where it was like basically in the 150s, constant, just sitting for like a week. My Apple Watch alarmed me a number of times, and probably the heart rate was because of the Lyme's disease. No one really knows for sure, but I was going in, I was getting treatment for the Lyme's, And I said, I got this heart rate. And they're like, okay, so come back. And they put me on an EKG. If you don't know what an EKG is, it's they put a bunch of stickers on your chest and torso, and they measure your uh, heart activity. And it was immediately abnormal. Even though my heart rate had come down at that point in time, it was it was abnormal. And I I guess the other piece I would add is this. I had begun having what I would describe as chest palpitations. Not painful, but the way I describe it is like there's a squirrel kind of bouncing around inside your chest. It would happen randomly and last for a few minutes and then go away. Um, the first time I remember having it was within a month or two of my second COVID shot. Have no idea if it was related at all. I'm not entirely sure whether I had those before then, but there was something about it. I was like, okay, this. It seemed like it was in close proximity to the second shot, um, and I made the decision I wasn't getting any of the boosters at that point in time. I was very much on the fence about getting the COVID shot in the first place. So I'm going to talk a lot more about that. So I went in. So when I went in and they had this abnormal EKG, the diagnosis came back as likely WPW, which stands for, I think, Wolf Parkinson's White. It's actually a congenital electrical pathway issue, um, where you're born with. So you have electrical pathways or conduits, I guess, between the top and bottom um, chambers of your heart, I guess, that just controls the beating so that they beat at the right time in the right sequence. And those of us with WPW have some additional pathways where energy can pass when it's not supposed to, and it can affect your heart rate. Fortunately, it's pretty benign for most people. It's actually more serious if you develop symptoms when you're younger, like you're in your 20s. I'm in my 40s, and usually by my point in life, it's not something to worry about. But there's that slim chance, like you're in that 1% of people you could just fall over dead from it, right? And there's a fairly easy fix for it. They go in and they identify it, and then they use an ablation procedure. An ablation procedure is where they use heat or cold, maybe other things too, but they basically kill some tiny amounts of tissue in your heart that's acting improperly. It's a common treatment for atrial fibrillation. So anyway, so as this is going up, I told the doctors, I'm like, look, I don't know if this is related to the COVID shot or not. I'm just telling you, this is the first time I remember getting these chest palpitations, and so this is all kind of being worked up. And I was very upfront with them, and I'm like, look, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I just want you to have the full picture of what's going on. And not surprisingly, none of them said it had anything to do with the COVID shot, and to the extent that I have WPW, that is pretty clearly a birth defect. It's not something that I don't think there's any evidence that it develops, let's say, traumatically. So I started having this workup for it, and I was I decided there was a variety of options. One is just to take a wait and see approach. Like I said, statistically, 99% of the time it's completely harmless, but that 1% of the time is what stood out in my mind. And so in talking about it with my wife, and I really did not want my wife constantly wondering when I go work out at the gym and stuff if that thing is just gonna misfire and that's gonna be the end of me. So I decided to go through with a an EP study, which they it's non-invasive. So they go in through your groin. They use your femoral veins. I think I misspoke when I said femoral artery. They go through the femoral veins, but it's a main conduit that brings blood back to your heart. So they go through both legs and they run a little scope up there. And I don't know exactly what they do, but they go in and they um, they try to, and I should back up. Before I did this, I went through whole kinds of other testing, heart stress tests. My heart is great. I got a strong heart. Arteries are all good. It's all healthy. Um, like I said, the arteries are good. Cholesterol is good. I wore a Holter monitor for a while but it never acted up. I never got these chest palpitations when I was being monitored, or in the clinic or anything like that. So we don't know exactly what those are, whether they're related to the WPW or something else. Um, but I for sure have WPW because it happens, basically on every heart rate. You just don't notice it, but they can measure it. They can see. And so, after doing all the conservative care, they're like, well, we can either sit and wait, or if you want to be sure, the only way to know for sure is we go in through your legs and we scope it. We basically apply either some chemical or electricity, whatever, to try and invoke this abnormal pathway and see if we can figure out exactly where it's at and determine if it's something serious or not. If it's something that's not ever going to be serious, we're just going to leave it alone, but we know where it's at. If it is serious, if it's potentially one of those one out of a hundreds that, if it fires at the right time, that could be the end of Onan, we'll fix it while we're in there. So that was sort of the game plan. It's primarily diagnostic, but also treatment if they felt like they could fix it. So I went in and finally had it done, Thursday. And my wife, was there, and there's a kind of a story behind that kind of ties us all together that I'll get to in a moment. Um, but I went in, and the first hour was basically unremarkable, almost to a negative point, because they couldn't get the WPW to clearly activate and show them where it was at, so they could decide if they could fix it. So they were basically concluding this thing can't be that bad because we've thrown everything at it and it doesn't activate. So we're going to call it a benign issue, and basically we're going to wrap up. So they're in the process of basically ending the procedure after an hour. And then I went into atrial fibrillation, which is not good. I think it's where the top of the heart gets very erratic. I don't know if that's chest palpitations or not, but it happened 3 times, during the procedure, and they had to shock me 3 times to reset it. Most likely, the atrial fibrillation was because of the chemical they inject into the heart to stimulate the activity. That's was their suspicion. I think that's still the belief, still the suspicion. But atrial fibrillation, unlike WPW, is not something you joke around about. You have to take it seriously. It'll show up in every one of my medical records now, I'm sure, for the rest of my life. So it was supposed to be an in and out procedure that day, and they kept me overnight in the hospital for observation just to be sure. And of course, nothing else happened. So they basically chalked it up to being the result of this, um, chemical during the procedure. But I was pretty beat up for a few days. Uh, I'm feeling quite a bit better now, but so that was kind of a roller coaster for my wife. One moment they're saying, "Yeah, we're done. We're going to pull it out," and then they're like, "Oh yeah, he went into AFib and we shocked him and blah blah blah." And so, fortunately, it all turned out well. It was in a very good hospital. They're trained. They know what they're doing. But basically, it was somewhat inconclusive, and now I have to have some additional monitoring. I might have some sort of a monitor implanted under my skin that constantly measures the activity, so they can, if I have these episodes again, they'll be able to tell exactly why and where it's happening. So anyway, now I'm in the recoup process. Just I gotta like rest and not lift anything heavy for a week or whatever, and so that's where I'm at now. So why am I talking about all this, and what does it have to do with COVID? Well, maybe it has nothing to do with COVID. I don't know. Um, it's possible. It's possible, and I don't know what the social media sites are doing it, or if I'm just going to get if I'll get my channel banned for suggesting it. But it's possible that some of this, not the WPW, but maybe these chest palpitations, maybe that was atrial fibrillation, maybe that was caused as a reaction to the COVID vax. I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. I don't think anyone would tell me if it was, but I'm here to tell you it's possible. It's a risk I knew when I took it. I'm going to talk a little bit more about why I took it and my feelings about it at the time, my feelings now. Um, but it may have nothing to do with it. But it's really hard to talk about it because you know if a younger man like myself starts having heart issues, everybody, oh, did you get the vax? And that's just drives me crazy that is always the first reaction without considering all the other information, without considering the fact that I had Lyme's disease and I have this congenital electrical pathway issue that only recently was diagnosed. So but I really wanted to use this as an opportunity to try to talk to people in a way that most people are not used to talking and not used to being talked to. So the day before my procedure, a couple days before my procedure, my parents had asked if they could be in attendance for this procedure with my wife. Now, what I have to tell you is I'm not estranged from my parents, but we're in a strained relationship, and we've been in a strained relationship since COVID and because of COVID. And I'm going to go into the history of that a little bit here for anyone who wants to hear it. But they had um, some some pretty traumatic things happened during that time that really strained our relationship, and it continues to be very strained to this day. And they had reached out to in, to the point where um, I limit my interaction with them, even though they live just a few miles away from us, which is hard. Um, but I've limited my interaction with them because it has been so toxic in the past, at least from our perspective. So they had reached out to me to ask if my wife would care if they were there, and the last thing I wanted, to be honest with you, was my wife to be sitting out in a waiting room for 3 or 4 hours with my parents when they just can't help themselves asking or making these kinds of statements because they are very much of the use a label you want, COVID, MAGA, whatever. They have learned to stop talking about this stuff around me, but it comes up. And so I really did not want that. I knew my wife would not want that, but I felt like I kind of had on my heart for a while that maybe it was time to try and mend some fences. So I said, well, I don't know, but I would be happy to meet with you guys beforehand. So I said, I'll stop by Wednesday morning, the day before the procedure, after I drop the kids off at school, and let's talk. And it was genuine. Like I really was not looking forward to this conversation, but I knew it needed to be done, and I thought it was necessary and important that I talk to them before I have this procedure. Um, and I know that it hurts my parents that we have this relationship, and I think we all kind of aren't sure how to fix it. All we know is everyone feels pretty hurt by it. So I stopped in. So this is Wednesday, the feast of Saint Joseph the Workman, I believe, or husband of Mary. Um, and I stopped in, and my mom was there, but my dad was not. I'm like, well, where's dad? Oh, he went to church this morning. I'm like, okay, but you knew I was stopping by. Well, he's got a real strong devotion to Saint Joseph, which okay, but like I, I told him I was supposed to come in and talk to him about this before I went in for this procedure, and he wasn't there, which seemed weird, but not out of the ordinary because my parents are just different that way. So I was like, and I really didn't want to be there all morning because I had stuff I wanted to do before I went, was off work for a while. So I was like, so being the good son that I was, I hung around and my mom talked mostly for about everything but this for about an hour and a half. I was like, man, he should be getting done with church by now. He didn't show up. And finally I was like, well, I gotta go. I have to go to work. So I left and then I get this text message after the fact that dad apparently he had planned to not be there because he was afraid of a confrontation and he waited until I was gone to come home and I just like that's really messed up. Um so anyway, that was how we left things. Um they did not come to the hospital thankfully. Haven't talked to them since then. We've exchanged some text messages, but all of this happened because of how COVID played out in our family that I'm going to talk about in a little bit here, hopefully. So I hope you guys are still with me. So I grew up in a very close family. I'm the oldest of four. It's myself, my brother, and then there's a big space, and then I have a brother and a sister. Um, my parents became we've always been Catholic, but became serious Catholics when I was a teenager, became traditionalist. I became traditionalist. I stopped becoming a traditionalist. They continue to be traditionalist. Um, and, you know, they've always been very into politics and conspiracy theories and all this and that. And over time, I just got tired of it. I got tired of thinking this was the last election of our times. This is some, this political event is some fulfillment of some mystic from the 1400s, and I just didn't want anything to do with it anymore. And we had kind of developed an ability to just kind of live and let live on that stuff until COVID came along. And I am not a liberal by any means. I guess if I'm being fully transparent, I consider myself a libertarian-ish. I still am. Um, I'm my philosophy is that I think for the most part people should be left to live their lives according to their own free choice without coercion from government. I'm a free market person. I'm limited government. That's just my attitude. I think there's lots of reasons for that. I'm not going to debate here, but I just want you guys to understand where I come from. So I tend to lean pretty heavily, I guess, right wing libertarian, but definitely not a conservative. Um, whereas, I guess my parents and my some of my siblings tend to be much more conservative, true blue conservatives, very proud MAGA, Trump supporters, all that kind of stuff. Which really wasn't a big problem until COVID came along, and then I wish I had a time machine. I could go back and see what was unfolding before us. I would have handled some things differently, but who could have guessed? Like when it first came out, I thought this is going to be a few day thing, maybe a couple weeks, and then everyone's going to go back to normal. Boy, was I wrong. Um, but so what what happened for us? So March of 2020 is when COVID kind of hit the U.S. and everything kind of went in lockdown. Um, we were expecting at that time. We were expecting number 8. Was it? It had been a difficult pregnancy for my wife. The last few have been anything but easy, but it was a difficult pregnancy. She was dealing with preeclampsia and some, I think, gestational diabetes, maybe. So when COVID came out and you saw all the horror possibilities. We were understandably concerned, but more importantly, we were given very clear protocols from the hospital and labor and delivery that if if when comes time for delivery, if mom tested positive for COVID, they were going to separate the newborn baby from mom for the normal um, quarantine time period, which in retrospect sounds crazy, but that's what we were told. We were told that that was the protocol, and so if we weren't really so afraid of getting COVID ourselves because we were afraid of it, dying from it or anything, we were absolutely concerned about getting COVID and having the arrival of our baby be so traumatic as to have the baby basically taken away and put into a NICU and fed a bottle. My wife is very much, advocate of breastfeeding. Has nursed all of our children, and we had we had gone through a somewhat traumatic event a couple of kids earlier, well, maybe 3 or 4 kids earlier. It all blends together. Um, the our baby, who was born about 9, 10 years earlier, had to be separated and put in the NICU for like low blood sugar issues and stuff like that. And that was really hard for my wife to not have that kind of bonding nursing ability, that is, very, very important to her and to us. And so she didn't want to go through that again. So we were just trying to be very careful not to catch it because we didn't want to go into the hospital with being COVID positive. Obviously, we also didn't want anyone to get sick or our new baby to die. So that was always kind of going in our mind, and we were trying to get to July of 2020, which is when we were due. So we were pregnant before COVID ever hit. And so from our standpoint, we were just trying to lay low. The schools were shut down. I was working remotely. um and then it was summer vacation, and we're like, we just want to have this baby, go home from the hospital, and then we can think about having something of a normal life. Well, what happened in the last month or two is, um one of my family members, who, like I said, is very much of the MAGA mindset, was sick and tired of all of the lockdowns. Not that they paid attention to it anyway, but they were in a state that was a little more rigorous in enforcing it. But as for them, they really didn't take it seriously, and in some ways, I think, kind of flaunted that they're going to live their life normally. They're not going to wear those stupid masks. They're not going to take those dumb tests. They're not going to stay home if they're sniffly, all that kind of stuff. Which, listen, I don't care. People should live their lives the way they want, as long as you let me live my life the way that I want. And that was sort of my attitude towards it. I was like, you guys go, you do what you want, but I'm not going to be hanging around with you until we have this baby. Well, they wanted my parents to come visit them, and my parents asked, well, do you care if we go up there? And this is getting close to the birth time, and we're like, well, you do what you got to do. But they were like, well, are you going to make us quarantine when you come back? And we're like, yeah, we are, because we're not going to take a chance of getting COVID right before we have this baby. And it was, in no way did we tell them they should not go, but we were like, but they were our sitters. That's who takes care of the kids when mom and dad have to go to the hospital when a baby's born. So we needed to come up with alternative arrangements if my parents were potentially not going to be available. So my parents decided not to go visit my brother, my family member, until after we had this baby, and that pissed off my brother and his family. And they said some pretty hurtful things, that were not true. um, but really accused us of being selfish and telling my parents not to go see them when all we were trying to do is to get through this pregnancy and not catch COVID before we had this baby. So some pretty unfortunate things were said at the time, and I get it. People were upset, people were stressed out, and I don't think there was any bad motives, but things were said, and it deeply hurt us, especially my wife, who's always had something of a strained relationship with my family anyway, that for reasons I won't get into. But that was sort of the beginning of the breakdown of our family. I had no idea at the time, but that moment left a scar that has yet to heal, and in many ways has only gotten worse over time. So, fast forward, we had the baby, everything was fine. Fortunately, no COVID. Did have to labor with masks on, which was tough until the very end. Um, had the baby, had a healthy baby, and then we more or less. So I guess we had the baptism a little while later. This was probably in August of 2020. At that time, there was still no public masses, um, and so we had a very small baptism with us, our godparents, and I think my parents, who were annoyed that they had to be there with mass, but that was the order of the diocese, that was the order of the um, bishop, and that was the order of this parish. And so that was awkward. But then we more or less kind of didn't really have any interaction, negative or otherwise, with my family for quite some time. Um, there was really no question or suggestion that we were going to get together for the holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, things like that. We were not going to do that anyway while COVID was still going on, and in whatever. Plus, all the stuff that had happened didn't help at all. So, fast forward a little bit to the um, the spring of 2021. I had so 2020 had been a tough year for me and my business. Um, we managed to get by like most people, but there was just a lot of uncertainty, and my um, inability to be out of work for an extended period of time was important. And so we I'm not I'll be perfectly honest with you, I'm not much of a vaccinator. I don't get the flu vaccines or anything like that. I get the tetanus shot when I need it. Um, I'm not anti-vax. I'm more of a hesitant person about those kinds of vaccines. So I really my initial inclination was against getting this vaccine since it was so new and there was so much controversy around it. Um, but what what ultimately made me decide to get the vaccine, and I still more or less feel like this was the right call for me at the time, was in our circle, people that our kids go to school with, where we go to church, family. Very few of them took COVID seriously at all, for better or for worse. Took none of it seriously at all, which in and of itself doesn't bother me too much. But where it did bother me is where not only would they not mask or not consider getting the vaccine for themselves, but even if they themselves felt sick, they would not go get tested. They would not necessarily stay at home nor keep their kids at home when they were sick, because from their standpoint, it wasn't their problem. if they had COVID. They weren't afraid of COVID. It's a big nothing burger. And if you don't want to get COVID, then you stay home and don't send your kids to school, which I felt strongly, and I still feel strongly, was the wrong approach. I think Christians, especially Catholics, missed a big opportunity with COVID and they failed miserably. I'm against the mandates. I've always been against the mandates, but I thought that we had a great moral duty to do what we could to help each other, to empathize with each other, to make other people feel safe. And that sort of flippant attitude towards other people, I thought was really, really harmful. Um, and I still feel that way. And it's still obvious to me that it's still the attitude of most people on that side of the spectrum. And I know that's going to anger some people, but I'm just telling you how I see it. So we were around. So even if we took reasonable precautions ourselves, and we were not rigorous about it, like you know, we were, I would say, reasonably prudent. Like we didn't do stupid stuff, but we kind of went about our life. We're like we're you can't avoid all risks, but you can avoid dumb risks, right? And so we try to avoid the dumb risks. And then if we still get it, so be it. But we're going to be try to be prudent about it without totally upheaving our life. But at the end of the day, if we wanted our kids to go to school, they were going to share the school with other families who didn't feel that way and didn't really seem to care at all if their kid brought COVID to school and gave it to my kids, which then in turn gave it to me, et cetera, et cetera. And so I had some pretty significant um, things coming up relative to my business that were my family was depending on financially. And if I was out of commission at the last minute because I got COVID or my kids got COVID and I was in a quarantine, a mandatory quarantine, some of these deals would fall apart and it could have represented financial, well, it would have been financial hardship, possibly financial ruin. Not to be too extreme about it, but there was some very bleak scenarios I was going over in my head that if I if my kids got COVID because they were exposed at school, um, it there was some really bad scenarios that I was trying to avoid, and I didn't feel that was prudent as a father and supporter of such a large family to not make prudent decisions, even if it meant taking a vaccine that I was not super thrilled about. So I ended up deciding to get the vaccine, and when I got the vaccine, at that time, it was still all of the information that I could glean as being reliable indicated it really would keep you from getting COVID. Um, that quickly turned out not to be the case, but at the time that I got the first dose, that was the what it was promoted to be able to do, and that was what I was looking for. I was looking for the ability that if my kids came home with COVID, it didn't knock me out of commission from being able to work and do what I need to provide for my family. So I got the first COVID vax, no issue. And I guess the other thing I should add is this: I did not tell my wife I was getting the shot. Not so much because she would have stopped me, although I think she would have. She's much more hesitant about vaccines even than I am, but mostly because I knew that if something went wrong, she would forever be haunted by her failure to stop me, and that my family would forever haunt her for not stopping me. And I was not going to do that to her. So I got the first one in, actually I think I got both of them in secret. And then I told her. Um and she was annoyed at first, but she quickly understood why I did that. It was primarily for her benefit than anything else that I did that. She's the only, well, some of my older kids, I have a son in the military, he got the shots. I have a another child who's out of the house and has some health issues, and she got him, but for the most part, none of our kids have otherwise gotten them. My wife hasn't gotten it. But that was my reason for getting, for better or for worse, that was my reasoning, and I still, under the circumstances, um, I defend my position, even if on hindsight it probably wasn't the right one. It was the best I could do with this information I had at the time. Now, at some point in time, not surprisingly, my parents found out that I had gotten the vaccines, and oh my gosh, it was bad. They had read all the stuff that there was these Luciferian demon particles in these vaccines. These are going to kill me. Um, Started telling my children that your dad is going to die now. Complete, I mean, just horrible stuff. And at one point, called me and screamed at me until they were so angry they had to hang up on me about why I did something so stupid. When this is exactly why I felt compelled to do it. So that was sort of the next big episode, was being screamed at by my parents for getting the vaccine and for what they told my kids, which I just don't understand why people would do that. But that's what happened. So the fracture in our family became worse because of that. And then things kind of calmed down. Like I said, I decided at that point I wasn't going to get the boosters. I still haven't gotten any of the boosters. Um, and but I also haven't gotten COVID. I don't think. Um, Really, no one in our family has gotten COVID. I don't think. Even though my wife tested for the COVID antibodies when she went in with our last pregnancy, but none of us have really gotten sick. Um, but we just kind of, we're starting to heal a little bit from all this when later that year, so it had been, so this is in the fall of 2021, a year and a half plus into COVID, and my mother, bless her heart, really wanted the family to get together again. And I know it was, they kind of like, I guess, were willing to tolerate the first year of not having everyone together, but she badly wanted everyone together for that holidays. And I we were close, but we just needed a little more time. Um, just we just needed more time for ourselves. Like, it wasn't that I had any anger or resentment towards anyone, but just, I don't know, you just feel like you need some more space and time. And unfortunately, um, my especially my mom wanted to try to force a reconciliation, and I says, I don't think I don't think we're going to be comfortable getting together. I really don't think my wife is going to be comfortable getting together after everything that was said, and there was really no acknowledgement that anyone did anything wrong. It was sort of, more or less, blame my wife for letting her get her feelings hurt. Which, you can debate that all you want, but I know my wife's heart is. I know her heart. I know her pain is real, and I'm not going to dismiss that. So I I said, well, let me talk to my brother. So I talked to my brother, had a phone call. We hadn't really talked at all in the last year, and I just said, look, mom wants us to get together, but here's what you need to understand. And I just like I'm talking to you now, I just laid it out there. And I said, "You just need to understand how much that hurt my wife, and she just feels very hurt by that." And Without getting too much into the details, I could tell you that there was no movement, no sense of regret or sorrow on the other side. I think if anything, they felt justified and gave sort of a flippant, "I'm sorry she felt hurt" kind of thing, but nothing resembling an acknowledgement. Never reached out to her. Basically, just ignored it like it never happened. Which, fine. I mean, I tried. I did it for my mom more than anything else, and so I got back to my mom and I said, I talked to him. I said, "This is what happened." I said, "Nothing's really changed, and I don't think we're ready to get together as a family." And at that point, my mom broke down. My dad got on the phone and started screaming at me and accusing me of all kinds of things, accusing my wife of all kinds of dirty things, and we just needed to get over it. And it was one of the, I still shake to this day when I think about it because to be yelled at with such hatred and contempt by people that you care about more than anyone in the world besides your kids and your spouse was really hard. But I kind of listened, and I did not lash back. I just listened and let them scream until they got they stopped. They hung up on me, and that was sort of strike 3, I guess, for us. And that one really shook me because of some of the things that came out of my dad's mouth that I never thought that man would say. And at that point in time, my mom was still watching the youngest kids when my wife worked part time. And I said, "We can't take our kids there anymore." And this was in no way a retaliation, or I genuinely did not feel it was safe for my kids to be there. So we immediately made the decision. We kind of we had to do a bunch of things. I think my wife changed her work schedule. I changed my work schedule. I started watching my daughter, or two of the kids. It was a complete chaos because we just didn't have any good options at that point in time. So, but I just couldn't do that, and I did not talk to my parents for some time. Um, but that one really cut deep. I still feel it. Talking about it now, I still feel like it was yesterday. And I know that my parents, especially my dad, feels bad about it. But I don't know that he feels that bad about it. I think he still feels like he was right and I was wrong and my wife was wrong. And maybe he's right. I don't know. All I can tell you is what happened and how it felt. And we just kind of had this uncomfortably uncomfortable close distance relationship with my family for the next couple of years. Really? Is that it? I haven't spoken to my brother really at all in 3 or 4 years. I don't hold anything against him, but my family, my wife was deeply harmed by what happened during that time period. And I wish there was a way to go back and change some things. Um, but here we are. And I'm not here to defend myself and say I was in the right all the time or even most of the time. And I'm not even here to say that anyone else in my family was in the wrong, but I'm just telling you how horribly this played out in our family. A good family, a family that loves each other, cares about their faith, but became so embroiled and brought so much pain and division into our families before we knew what was going on, and by the time it was too late to do anything about it. And it's really unfortunate. Um, I know it kills my parents. It kills me. Um, but at the same time, every time I get together with my family, I feel very uncomfortable and I start to shake a little bit and I replay over and over and over again those phone calls and I just can't I just don't enjoy it. I'm like, why do I why do I want to go put myself through it? No, I do. I do for my parents' sake. I'll visit my parents for holidays and things like that, but I have very limited contact with them. I have almost no contact with some of my siblings now, for better, for worse, and I wish it weren't that way. But it is what it is, and it hurts me to see that these these attitudes still prevail today. Um, just the other day, I saw Taylor Marshall posted something. I saw it on one of my other accounts because he blocked me because he's a big baby. Posted something about a anti-vaxxer nurse who injected up to 8,600 elderly patients with salt water instead of COVID vaccine walks free from court in Germany. And so he posted that and wanted to get people's thoughts on that. So this woman, this nurse, who was supposed to be giving the COVID vaccine to people, gave them a fake, harmless, whatever. And I think you can probably imagine what the comments are like in there, how they felt about this woman. And to me, it's pretty obvious what she did was wrong, horribly wrong. Regardless of how you feel about the vaccine, that's not her job. That's not your job. That's not your decision to make. That's those people's decisions to make. And that's the part about where our world is at now that really hurts me is that people have lost the ability to empathize with people that think differently from themselves. And I'm not here to say free of that, but I see it so much. People have become so firmly entrenched in their views that they're convinced that they're right and may in fact be objectively right and see that as a reason to be completely uncaring, impatient, um, outright offensive to anyone that thinks differently. And I'm really afraid for our future as long as we continue to have this position. And I don't know if COVID caused this or if COVID just shined a light on this attitude that always existed. But it really scares me to see good people so willing and able to cast basic Christian charity and humility and empathy out the window for political reasons. That really scares me. And in many ways, I don't see it getting better. I see it getting worse. And just let me just add something here. Lest I be misunderstood, I spent a lot of time directly or implicitly picking on the right wing folks. The left wing folks got it wrong too, and continue to get it wrong, and are going to have to come to reckoning with that. Um, the problem is that some of the left wing's criticisms of the right are absolutely justified, and some of the criticisms the right wing have of the left was absolutely justified. So each side has some element of truth, and therefore are never going to compromise or acknowledge they're wrong because they know in their hearts that they're at least partially right, and many think they're completely right. And I would like to I would like to encourage people to just step back, put aside your firmly held convictions, religious, political, or otherwise, and just try to put yourself in the shoes of your neighbor and where they're at, and just love them for who they are, not for what they believe and what they get wrong. I wish we could all do that. So, anyway, that's um that's what I have to say about it. Something that I've really wanted to talk about for a long time, and I think most of us are good people and want to be good people, and it can be really easy in the fervor of politics, church or politics or whatever, to really get caught up in see it as us versus them. And I don't think it has to be that way. I think it's all of us just trying to do our very best, trying to love ourselves and care for ourselves and our family, and all of us just not having the full picture. And I really firmly believe all of us need to embrace that to some degree. Some of us maybe more than others, but I really, really want to encourage people to just stop for a moment and just honestly and vulnerably ask yourself, am I really willing to empathize and think about it from my neighbor's perspective, um, on matters that until now I've felt very, very righteous and confident about? Maybe we can just all do that a little bit. And I think that alone could make a huge difference in the church, in society, in the world. But it's going to take some internal reflection and maybe some hard acknowledgement of where we've failed in the past. And maybe we need to reach out to family members and friends that we have harmed or alienated or been alienated by. I'm trying to do that. I still hope to reconcile with my family. Pray for me, pray for my family. I don't it doesn't bring me joy to tell you about this because it's a really painful, embarrassing thing, but it's real. It's our story, it's our family, and I'm sure we're not the only ones caught in this situation where everyone feels hurt and no one really knows how to make the hurt go away. And I want that to end. I hope that can end. Whew. So anyway, I'm gonna wrap this up. My kids will be showing up here shortly, and I'll take them home for the night. So I appreciate those of you who listened intently through the whole thing. I apologize if this went on too long and if I offended anyone. Um, just wanted to get that off my chest, and just really want to encourage all of you to just maybe ponder a little bit what I said. Maybe there's something there that you can um, use to maybe look at your relationships, look at your ideas just a little differently, and maybe see there's something more to learn and more opportunities to love. Because there's anything this world could use more of is love, right? So let's love each other. Let's forgive each other. Let's acknowledge our offenses. Let's forgive. Let's move on, and let's support each other and make the world better, make the church better, the best that it's ever been. That's why I'm here. Very blessed to have all of you in my life. Appreciate everything that you guys do for us. And yeah, so um should be back to the normal sex stuff here the next episode. So hope you guys enjoyed that. If not, don't worry, this won't be a recurring recurring thing. So yeah, so anyway, thanks everyone for listening slash watching, and until next time, have a good one.